Good evening, everyone. I'm Vidya Gajapathi Raju Singh, Ehsaas Woman from Chennai. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Prabha Khaitan Foundation to an exclusive unveiling event, Kitaab, for the book titled Swallowing the Sun by Mrs. Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri at this iconic property of the Taj West End, here in this beautiful city of Bangalore. The foundation has hosted several literary events that bring together authors, poets, and literary enthusiasts. These events foster discussions on literature, society, and culture, while also serving as platforms for emerging voices. Before we have the opportunity to listen to the author, Mrs. Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri, and novelist and conversationalist for today, Mrs. Anita Nair, allow me to introduce the Prabha Khaitan Foundation and its assorted area of works. The Prabha Khaitan Foundation, as a Kolkata-based non-profit trust, is recognized as an organization that creates the finest literary and cultural experiences on the global map. The foundation was established by an eminent Indian entrepreneur, philanthropist, social activist, and feminist, the late Dr. Prabha Khaitan, back in the early 1980s. With the vision of late Dr. Prabha Khaitan and her golden philosophy, Karma Hi Jeevan Hai, the foundation strives relentlessly to create cultural capital through activities and endeavors that propagate literary and cultural assets of India. In the past 4 decades, the foundation grew in stature and recognition as an organization that gives the best platform to writing geniuses and showcases the kaleidoscopic cultural heritage of India. The foundation dedicatedly works across more than 50 cities to connect readers to literary creations of authors and poets, and showcases talented musicians, dancers, storytellers, and performing artists through its stellar literary and cultural initiatives. The foundation cherishes the close association of distinguished associates, collaborators, partners, and Ehsaas women of India in creating landmark events on the global map. It supports the UNESCO view that cultural development has the potential to be an alternative way of promoting sustainable development in rural communities. The anthem of Prabha Khaitan Foundation deserves a special mention. It is ensured by the national philosophy, unity in diversity. The anthem of the Prabha Khaitan Foundation has been curated by the musical genius Pandit Vishwamohan Bhattji. The anthem reflects the true essence of the multicultural diversity of India. The foundation has diverse boutique literary initiatives under its wing: an author's afternoon, the Right Circle, Kalam, Akar. Of all the initiatives, Kitaab occupies a unique significance to us, marking the emergence of each birth of a book and offering authors a stage to present their latest literary works to an insightful and discerning audience. Before we start the launch ceremony, allow me to formally introduce today's author, Mrs. Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri. Mrs. Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri has been an Indian Foreign Service diplomat for 28 years. She has served in leadership positions at the United Nations for 15 years, most recently as its Assistant Secretary General. She was a leader in the first global organization to promote gender equality, UN Women, for 7 foundational years. She is the recipient of the Eleanor Roosevelt Award for Human Rights, among others. I would like to request Mrs. Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri ji to please come to the stage. May we have a round of applause for her. Thank you. It is with great honor and reverence that we welcome our chief guest, Mrs. Geetanjali Vikram Kirloskar, to grace this event with her esteemed presence. Mrs. Kirloskar, with her unparalleled charisma and vision, is a name that any introduction may fall short of. She is the chairperson and managing director of Kirloskar Systems Private Limited, based in Bangalore. She committed herself to the partnership, giving support and value addition in her endeavors, personally and through several important platforms. She is a dynamic leader driving India-Japan business partnerships. Her work spans international relations, green mobility, and social impact. She is also a passionate advocate for sustainability, empowering underprivileged communities, and being a voice to support many social causes. Today's event is being supported by the Kirloskar Group. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your support. I would like to request Mrs. Geetanjali Vikram Kirloskar to please come to the stage. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to request our conversationalist for today, Mrs. Anita Nair, to come up on stage as well. Prabha Khaitan Foundation promotes cultural understanding and appreciation. The foundation promotes local artisans, their artifacts, handicrafts, and handlooms to show appreciation to our patrons and guests by endorsing their products. PKF encourages everyone to buy local products from local craftsmen as their lending hand in their sustainability and development. At all our events, local food is served, which means spreading awareness about locally grown produce in the city, highlighting the relevance of the same. Today we are pleased to felicitate with the ethnic Chikankari handloom scarves from Lucknow. I would like to cordially request and call upon Anindita Chatterjee ji, Executive Trustee, Prabha Khaitan Foundation, to felicitate the guests on stage. Now the moment that we've all been waiting for, the book launch ceremony. I kindly request Mrs. Geetanjali Vikram Kirloskar to unveil and launch Swallowing the Sun by Mrs. Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri. To join us, I would like to request Ms. Anju Bobby George, Ms. Indira Bhargava, Mr. Pankaj Advani, and Mr. Dhanraj Pillay to please join us on stage.
Hello. Photographer.
Thank you, everyone. I would cordially request others to take their respective seats while Mrs. Puri and Mrs. Anita Nair remain on stage and to be seated. I would like to request our chief guest, Mrs. Geetanjali Kirloskar, to share a few words with us.
Few words were very difficult, so I'm going to share many words, and I thank you for your patience in advance. I must admit, Lakshmi, I'm a little humbled sharing the stage with you today, yet grateful to have this opportunity of engaging with a personality who has not only achieved a lot, but is also a friend, for whom I care for and deeply respect, as did my late husband, Vikram. Very happy to see Hardeep Singh ji here. I was told, I thought that he might not come, but then I said, he is not going to miss celebrating Lakshmi and swallowing the sun. It was also very wonderful to spend time with Indira. And yesterday, I could experience the shared values and the sisterly bond. At the risk of repeating her accolades, Lakshmi Puri, a distinguished diplomat, former ambassador, in leadership positions at the UN, leader in the first global organization to promote gender equality, recipient of the Eleanor Roosevelt Award for Human Rights, many more, and now an author who has earned literary acclaim with her debut novel, Swallowing the Sun. Some people's grace transcends intimacies, niceties, or as you, Lakshmi, yourself put it, the pantomime of diplomacy. I remember, Lakshmi, you and Hardeep had me home for dinner very soon after Vikram passed. Sensitively invited an intimate group of our common and very close friends. Your quiet understanding illuminated my grief. I was a little uncertain of myself that day, standing alone suddenly, almost like the ant. But your empathy and strength acted as a balm. As we know, a home reflects the sensibilities and the aesthetic of those who live in it. Lakshmi and Hardeep's home has the style and elegance, a little of the international with a touch of tradition, tempered with a certain quirkiness, almost pink ceilings. We had traditional food with a twist served in beautiful thalis, and an unsaid message passed between us, woman to woman, that grief is not a source of rage, but a touchstone to a woman's strength. It's amazing, Lakshmi, how some people like you pass on so much unspoken, unwritten, and now written. Lakshmi manifests the perfect balance and blend between timeless values and modernity, a progressive mind that can match the best in gender and ability, wearing her traditional sari while leading on an international stage of intelligence balanced with empathy, which is perhaps why, Lakshmi, you have been a very successful diplomat and now a prolific writer. As Anand Mahendra put it at the Mumbai launch, Lakshmi joins the rank of writers who have achieved fame while practicing dual careers. I'm sure she brings to the pantomime of diplomacy the high creativity of her art. It springs from a rootedness in Marathi and Indian culture that permeates her book, Swallowing the Sun. Her diplomatic skills and her writing reflect this rootedness because despite the pantomime, people always respond to authenticity. Swallowing the Sun entered my life when I most needed it. Just as you, Lakshmi, reached out and soothed my heart, so did your book and your writing. After my sudden loss, as I said, I was beginning to feel much like the ant. So I was motivated not only by the ant who flies out into the sky, but actually swallows the sun. I got a sense of courage and conviction through my adversity, because the resonance that great literature evokes also rewards. As I started reading the book in the beginning, Lakshmi, your personality overpowered my reading. I guess that happens to all authors' friends when they read the first novel. But a few pages in, the power of Swallowing the Sun immersed me as I rooted for Malti and Kamla. While on the surface, my childhood and later life are nothing like Malti's, she resonated with me deeply. This ability to connect with every reader is the hallmark of great literature, and I'm sure that Swallowing the Sun will find its place in the annals of modern Indian literature. We look forward to many such books and to you being one of India's prolific women writers. It is a tribute to the transcendence of the art of writing that excellent writing can come from the opposite ends of the establishment and anti-establishment segments. The resonance with Malti was rewarding because Malti's courage and spirit spoke to me independently of the specifics of era and plot. Though it's about women struggling to fight patriarchy against the backdrop of the independence movement, I think across 3 decades. From the norm that tradition binds and suppresses, it's about women who don't just want to, I quote, step into the masculine realm but shape it too, unquote. As the book says, I quote, the desire to learn subjects and new ideas at the level of complexity that women were not privileged to access. Tough young women to the world, no wallpapers for craven bees, unquote. Studying Kafka, playing sport, and living life. But it is not activism overt aggressive feminism, nor rebellion, nor insensitivities to the environment. I think of the book as a tribute to the ordinary, in quote, daring to attain the unattainable, yet anchored in their family, their culture, and the society around. This way of harmonious striving towards self-realization and equality profoundly resonates with me, as it would with many. Frankly, it transcends gender and can be true of either man or woman. In fact, I found the male characters equally strong but sensitive. In my eyes, my dear friend Lakshmi is much the same as the person and the author we are celebrating today. Somewhere, Lakshmi, in my mind, at the end of it all, you represent the Indian woman who is not just a gender, but a civilizational value. And that also reflects in the women characters in your book. While swallowing the sun is an expression of the potentiality of the innate strength of ordinary people, I think the closing two lines of the beautiful Abhang from the book, which she has quoted, also adds a cosmic truth that this strength springs from the human soul's ability to be untouched by the strangeness and predation of Maya or reality, and hence I quote from it. Muktabai sees all. Muktabai laughs, unquote, and life goes on. Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you, Lakshmi, for giving the world a gift that is timeless across generations. Thank you for being a friend through my darkest moments. Above all, for being the woman you are and the author you have become. Over to Lakshmi.
Thank you, Mrs. Kirloskar, for your very inspiring words. Swallowing the Sun tells the story of Malti, a young girl growing up in Maharashtra, caught up in the freedom movement's fervor, and how she navigates sisterhood, friendships, and revolution. Swallowing the Sun by Lakshmi Puri is unputdownable and beyond all expectations. In conversation with today's author, Mrs. Lakshmi Murdeshwar Puri, we have prolific writer and high-profile supporter, UNHCR, Miss Anita Nair. Anita Nair is the best-selling and critically acclaimed author of some amazing novels: The Better Man, Ladies Coupe, Mistress, Lessons in Forgetting, Idris, Keeper of the Light, and Alphabet Soup for Lovers. She has also authored a crime series featuring Inspector Gowda. Without much ado, I'd like to request Ms. Nair to kickstart the conversation. Urge you all to sit back and enjoy a wonderful conversation ahead. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and I'd like to start off by congratulating Lakshmi Puri on this wonderful book, Swallowing the Sun. So congratulations, Lakshmi. See, one of the joys about reading fiction is how it transports us to different worlds. And when the novel is something that enables us to actually climb into a time machine and travel backwards, then it becomes not just a historical novel, not just a period piece of writing, but it's also something that allows us to witness almost firsthand the various, I would think, the fabric of that times. So here in Swallowing the Sun, what you see is there are multiple things that are happening, which is always the hallmark of a good book, is that on the first level, you see the story, a coming-of-age novel about a young girl, Malti, and her very feisty spirit, which kind of is luminescent and shines right through the book from the beginning to the end. And you also see how the wonderful Marathi culture, which we haven't really read too much about in Indian writing in English, in fact hardly anything at all, is brought into, and that becomes part of the narrative. It becomes the backdrop. And then there is a third layer, which is the freedom struggle. You have Malti coming from a very traditional background, but has a very encouraging father who is somebody who believes in education for women. And so he sends his daughters off to an ashram to study there and to learn all the things that are going to make them pioneers of this country when it becomes India eventually as a free country. So there is so much happening there, and then there is also this wonderful relationships that pop up in the book, and you see so much happening. So, when you look at Swallowing the Sun, it's not just a historical novel, it's, an account of a certain time, it's also the account of the freedom struggle, it's also an account of a young girl coming into her own. So this is the book that we are going to be discussing today. And I'd like to start off with my first question, which is, a standard question, but I would urge Lakshmi not to answer it with a standard answer, which is basically what led to the writing of this book.
Good evening, Namaskara, Namma, Bengaluru. So before I, join this conversation, I would like to thank our chief guest and my dear friend Geetanjali for, in fact, suggesting that we have it here in Bengaluru. And Bengaluru is such a special place for me because it has been a kind of hometown. And my parents, my father B.G. Murdeshwar, who was born in Kumta, and his name comes from the temple town of Murdeshwar. He and my mother, also named Malti, who inspired this novel, spent their last years here in Bangalore, in Malleshwaram, close to my sister and her family, who also were there for quite some time. So coming back to Bengaluru is also a part of, reclaiming my past, which this novel is as much about. And thank you, Geetanjali, for your wonderful words of affirmation, of friendship. And we take inspiration from your courage, from what a power woman you are in your own right, and how you inspire and mentor others. I really wish you all the very best in managing this empire that you have taken in your hands now. So all the very best for that, and thank you again. And I'm very privileged to be in conversation with Anita Nair. Always admired her, and I've come into this avatar as a writer, very, very new. This world is to me. So I always draw inspiration from particularly women writers like you. But you are a writer. I mean, I don't want to characterize it as women, but as a great writer like you. I look forward to our conversation and our friendship going forward and learning from you as well, because I feel this is just the beginning of my journey. So, how and why did I write this novel? I want to begin by quoting my dear friend Malashri Lal's a poem where she said, "May you honor your ancestors whose genes sleep deep within you, who fought for freedom and kinship for little women such as you." So that was it is a tribute very much, and very much inspired by my parents' journey, their extraordinary life, and that era that they lived in. And and I was born to them when they were 45. So I had a kind of child's insight into their world, and they were great storytellers. They were steeped in literature, in Sanskrit literature, in Marathi literature, in English literature. So their story and their world, and some eras, as I said, need to be memorialized, and I really felt that this was a story waiting to be written and wanting to be written. But it took a long, long time. You said something very beautiful in in the introductions of one of your books, that one must pluck the day or pluck the movement and the rightness of the moment one has to seize. But I did start writing this not as a biography, but as a novel in 2000 when I was ambassador in Budapest. And I wrote 100 pages, and then I got a block, mental block, writer's block they call it. And I had other excuses. I was busy with work and family and everything. And then it was only when I returned to India many years later in 2018, but I really started at the instance of my soulmate and husband, Hardeep Singh Puri, and my sister, Indira. When COVID came, they said, you have to finish the novel. And this was a labor of love. I did want to tell the world what the story is. And it was a question of, those days you got up thinking, not knowing whether you'll live the next day or not. So I told myself, it's now or never. So I wrote for 1 year, working 8 to 10 hours every day, and first draft was 270,000 words. It had to be shrunk to 150,000. So, and then it got published, and David Davidar discovered it, and so I'm very grateful for that. So that's how this book came about. But I did not want it to be a biography, because I wanted the veil of fiction to bring out the truth. And that's what you sometimes need. And I also wanted, it to speak to the heart, be inspired, even, the spirituality of it to come out, philosophy, different aspects, which only fiction can bring forth. So that was the journey. And of course, the characters, many of them are taken from real life, but the trajectories may be different. And also I've created a whole world of characters. I wanted it to be an act of creation as much as, recording from memory. I wanted it to be or something that is about epiphanies. So it was all of that.
Speaking of epiphanies, long before I knew about the book, but I'd seen the title of the book appear, and it piqued my interest, because swallowing the sun, and you wonder what it is all about. And later, of course, when I started reading the book, the first thing that you stumble upon is, of course, this wonderful Abhang by Muktabai. And then you wonder how is it relevant to this book. And then as you read it, and you read it further, you discover how relevant it is. So would you talk a bit about the title itself and how you found it, and, the Abhang?
This Abhang of Muktabai has possessed me since I was a child, and I think my mother introduced me to it as something that should inspire me. But it was also the persona of Muktabai herself. Imagine this teenage saint, a woman saint, who had disciples, who was, we talk about women-led development, but this was about women-led mysticism. So she fascinated me even as a personality and inspired me. And this Abhang, which is, I think perhaps I should recite it first in Marathi and then in English. So this Abhang, Mungi urali akashi, tine ille suryashi, thor navlav zhala, Vansaputra prasavla, Minchu patalasi zai, Shesh matha bandi pai, Mashi vyali khar sali, Dekhuni muktai hasi. The ant flies into the sky. She swallows the sun. Another miracle. A barren woman gives birth to a son. The scorpion burrows down to the nether realms. The snake king Shesha bows its head at its feet. The housefly begets a hawk. Muktabai sees all, Muktabai laughs, as you quoted Geetanjali. So, the meaning of it and what it inspires in us all is that if you have faith, if you dare, and if you persist, even the seemingly impossible, and I'm using the word seemingly impossible, becomes possible. And that's the theme, that's the epigraph of this novel, and it cuts across all the themes and the love story, the epic love story that this novel is, the coming of age, the young people's struggle and joys and sorrows and compromises, the fight between destiny and free will, all of that. And as you said, even the freedom movement. So my characters, the women particularly, but also men, both British and Indian, because there are both kinds of characters here, they seem to be, as I say, touched by some kind of magic, to try to attain the impossible, whether they succeed or not, whether it ends in triumph or tragedy. So that's the import of this Abhang, and it's also therefore reflected in the title of the book, Swallowing the Sun, trying to do the impossible, to attain the unattainable. But may I just read a paragraph on how that translates into Malti, whom you referred to, her perception of who she is, what she is struggling towards. And it's also part of the metamorphosis theme. Many themes run through this novel. Malti and Kamla had come to believe that they were living in Bombay at a time when everything was being turned inside out and upside down, the improbable Muktabai way. It was as if the small, sweet LG bananas grew with their ivory-colored, fragrant, sweet, pulpy flesh outside, enveloping their thin, yellow, blotchy skin inside. It was as if the Indian tiger had come out of the forest and sat supping with brown coolies at the starched linen-covered table in the Gymkhana Club of Bombay, being served by British sahibs in red and white uniforms, doubling over to please the natives. It is as if the frail Indian ascetic, with nothing but the sword of his soul force, the shield of his khadi loincloth, and the cannon fire of the Indian masses, was breaching the iron and stone battlements of the great British Empire, riding on the waves of his tremulous voice. They cherished their freedom to become part of this miracle. Miracle making, even if as a tiny party, they did not want to lose that privilege.
The book, Swallowing the Sun, has this wealth of characters. So there is Malti, I would think, who is the heroine of this book, the protagonist really, and there is her father, Baba as they call him, and there is Malak, is that how you say it? Malak, yeah, Malak, and there is Miss Crawford. There's so many characters. There's Guru, there's Sham, there's Chandra, so many of them. And each one of them are a representative of their times, even down to the dacoit chief. So how did you go about creating these characters? Where did they come from? I know, as all writers would say, that part of it is imagination and part of it is drawn from reality. But how did you go about shaping these characters?
So as you described very well, so I just want to say once again that she is the heartbeat of the novel, and drawn from my mother, Malti Desai herself. I've kept that name the same. All the others are have different names and also have been transformed a lot, but she, in her spirit and character, very much represents my mother's, and also her journey, to some extent, is drawn from my mother. But I have changed the trajectory to also reflect what my mother may have preferred and, as aspired to in terms of where she wanted to go. So that is one. Then the other characters, the women characters, are drawn from books. They have come to me as and claimed me as a creator, and each one of them I very much love them. There is Sarla, who is defiant, again another phenomenal women. These are all phenomenal. Ambutai, then Shaila, Miss Crawford, Dorothy, all of these characters, they are phenomenal women. They are boundary making and they are boundary breaking and setting their own Lakshman Rekhas as much as keeping them. So then there are the men, and very rightly said, people have really remarked on how empathetic, how women empowering these men are. Baba was drawn from my grandfather, my mother's father, and in real life, he was a champion of women's education. He fought against child marriage, and he made sure that his two daughters, who were orphaned or half orphaned after his wife died, giving repeated childbirth at very young age, he said, my daughters, no, this will not happen to them. And then he, it was tough love. He sent them to an orphanage school and then, allowed them to go forward. So, and he was very much influenced by Maharshi Karve and Mahatma Phule and all of their teachings, and really took that forward. So many people, many readers have told me he's the real hero of the novel in so many ways, because he enabled the women who as much, of course, Malti and Kamla and some of the other women, they seized agency. They even sometimes extracted agency when it was not available. But there were these enabling men. And Malak is another one. They are very much rooted in, Malak is a feudal lord, rooted in patriarchy and conditioned by it. But even he is liberal enough to get his daughters educated and let them, horse riding, do things that are unconventional, and they want to excel in it, be pioneers in that. But at some point, the patriarchy takes over, and there are tragedies that happen. So there are these different characters. But Guru is very much inspired by my father, who was a lawyer, a brilliant lawyer, who became also who helped write the Constitution of India with Dr. Ambedkar-ji. So his Guru is very much the inspiration. He was a feminist, he was a poet, and he was very much the woman affirming man, that he for she. And I must say that in my husband, I have a he for she also. In UN Women, we used to have this campaign of men who stand up for gender equality. So I very much modeled many of these men to really champion women's empowerment. So this is this whole cast of characters who sometimes, as you know very well, who resemble sometimes the people you have met, you have seen through your life or heard about. But also then we have cameo roles of Mahatma Gandhi, of Jahangir Petit, of Tedu Krishnamurti, Annie Besant, Madan Mohan Malviya. So all these come in cameo roles, meeting our actors and the heroine. But I would like to also very much remark on something that you refer to, the civilizational value. As an advocate of gender equality and women's empowerment, one of the things that I have been very proud of in our civilization is no other civilization deifies women as much as ours. And so in Guru at one point, he deifies Malti and makes a pledge to be always a worshipper. So I would like to please read something from his worshipful song. Madhu Malti, you are the goddess installed in my temple's sanctum sanctorum. To the exhilarating heartbeats of celestial drums, my fevered chanting and joyous limpid songs. You accept me as your devotee, and I pledge my whole life to you. My dreams, dreamt and undreamt, for you to see and turn into miracles. And then he goes on to say, I will in turn shield you from non-believers in your divinity. We will be iconoclasts in other ways too. Show them we can be and do anything. So this, he makes a pledge, it's a kind of pledge. And later, when Malti finds that he is not keeping up to his pledge of being a worshipper, she scolds him and confronts him, and he asserts that he's still her worshipper, that she's still his goddess. So Malti's response to that is that I am a goddess not because you made me so. I am a goddess because of who I am and what I did for you. So this, this relationship, the Ardhanarishwar relationship also that I have brought up, half that there is in all of us, a woman principle and a man principle, and the two are in equilibrium. So that is also something that has been explored through these characters. Also Malti's, can-do spirit, that I can be anything, I can do anything, is very much there throughout the novel. And the fact that she becomes, she goes back to becoming, after an interregnum, goes back to becoming a lawyer. She wins this, really path-breaking case of defending revolutionaries, armed revolutionaries. And that's the swallowing the sun moment for her. So these are many aspects. And then there is a poem of Tilak, which I have used to show her spirit. And it's a kind of anthem for all women and girls. Bola havete malaka yatyache pure zaanato meets maze bada. And then I'll just translate a little bit of it. Am I not complete and auspicious? The purpose of God's creation felicitous. It matters not to me what is your opinion. I well know my own strength, my dominion.
One of the most interesting scenes for me in this book is that Mahapanchayat that happens, under this tree, and the sarpanch from different villages have come, and this whole question is about women's education, and should girls should they have the school, and should girls be allowed to go there? So one of the things that you notice, apart from everything that Lakshmi has been speaking until now, about the characters, about the source of the title and what led her to writing, etc. One of the things that I was very struck by in this book is how the Marathi culture has been, am I saying it right? Should it be Maratha or Marathi culture?
Marathi.
Yeah. Marathi culture is talked about, for a lot of Indians. We all live in these little insular pockets of just knowing our own cultures, and very little beyond that, apart from what is available in popular mediums like cinema. So, but then there is this wealth of little civilizations, I would say almost, that exist throughout this country, and in some ways they are so alike in all civilizations within India, and in some ways they're so different. So another image, along with the Mahapanchayat scene in my mind, is that of Malti in a 9-yard sari with a padar. How do you padar? Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Yeah. Tied tightly around her waist and playing tennis. I can't just get this image out of my mind. And then there's references to food, there's references to clothes, there's reference to governance, the period of the times, all of it. So suddenly, for years together, the reading world have been subject to Kerala and Bengal. And suddenly, out of nowhere, you have this story that is set in Maharashtra, in various parts of Maharashtra. So for me, it was like not just a period novel, it was also a kind of anthropological, look at this culture that I know very little about. Strangely enough, my father lived all his life almost in Maharashtra, but I've never, spent time there. So, would you talk a bit about how you wove in the Marathi culture?
I agree with you that Marathi culture is one of the richest of, if you would call it, the sub-civilizations or subcultures of India. And indeed, my mentor and friend, Namita Gokhale, when she read the first draft, she said, "Oh, wow, you are a pioneer, because perhaps you are the first Indian writer in English to bring out, and to mine the seams of Marathi culture." This era also was one where there was a confluence of the freedom movement. There was a civilizational awakening where young people, Western educated, imbibing the Western ideas, using them to fight oppression and colonialism, but at the same time, drawing strength from this civilizational awakening and confidence from that. And there's so much parallel and resonance with the present, of course. And then the third aspect was this cultural efflorescence that was happening in Maharashtra. So that period, that's why I said, I wanted to capture that period in the novel. So this was a period where Marathi theatre, Marathi music, poetry, and this was providing a kind of soul force to the freedom movement as well. And a whole new generation of artists and writers were flourishing and coming forth. So I wanted to capture that, but apart from that, many people have asked me, you have been a Pardesi in many ways. I've never lived in Maharashtra. I was born and brought up in Delhi. But my father made sure that we were immersed in Maharashtrian literature, culture. We used to come to Bombay, live for a week or two. Even if we were there for a week or two, we would watch plays the whole time. All the days we would watch Sahitya Sangh. We would live upstairs and we would watch. And he would recite poetry every day. And he was himself a poet. Unfortunately, I don't have any poems of his remaining, but his book of favorite poems, which he gifted to me, I want to show you. It says, "For Lakshmi, electrostatic 1983 of manuscript of 1926. So he used to recite a poem every evening, and he had a different tune for every poem that he recited. So it was something that I, imbibed without actually being in situ. So in some ways, it was, as my friend Ranjit Hoskote says in one of his poems, that what you have lost comes back to reclaim you. I have been also out of India, not only out of Maharashtra, but out of India. So this was a way in which what I lost came back to reclaim me. And theatre, in my novel 2-3, you've given some examples. But let me just give you 2 examples and perhaps read a passage. One example is of how I have used theatre as resistance. M.V. Varelkar was a friend of my father's, and I used to, we used to lionize him. He's one of the greatest and revolutionary playwrights in Marathi. Also a social revolutionary himself. Bhumi Kanya Sita, for example, his play is known for his strong advocacy of women's rights. And even this Satte Che Gulam, Enslaved by Power, there are 2-3 chapters on this. And this is the beginning of the journey of the young people, Guru and Malti and Kamla and Ram, how they start their journey of, spreading national advocacy on nationalism, movement building on nationalism. That's how they start. So theatre as resistance, and Marathi theatre, which was again coming up in a big way. And then there is the famous Bal Gandharva, Natya Sangeet, and I want to read a passage from that, if I may. And there, the fervent contest between the half woman and half man incarnated in the fused being of the Ardhanarishwar enthralled Malti and Kamla from the very first scene when Bal Gandharva appeared as Sindhu in this play called Ekats Pyala, only the one last glass of wine, alcohol. So, Ek Aakhri Jam, that is the kind of thing. And it's a tragic play where this middle class housewife is a long suffering one and keeps faith with her drunkard husband till the last, and it's a tragedy. But Bal Gandharva plays the role of Sindhu, the housewife. So this is the description. His muscular body, wide with the graceful flow of his Maheshwari cotton sari with its reversible bugdi border, its padar casually flung across his wide shoulders. This, even as he delicately twisted its edge with a demure, sideways glance at the uncaring husband. The sleeves of his checked kharn blouse seductively clasped his firm biceps when he held up his hand heavenwards, seeking the benediction that never came. As he touched his padded breasts to express Sindhu's heartache, his tall, erect form seemed to melt away like the hearts of his rasikas. His long, manly strides across the stage jostled with the consciously cultivated, nubile, feminine gait. His powdered pale face caught Sindhu's sorrow. His cheeks nevertheless bloomed with the rouge of rapturous suffering. His painted lips parted in both pain and song. And then the wig with a round bun ensured that the irrepressible fuzz on his face and assertive thick eyebrows had no chance of betraying his masculinity and dominance. His deep, powerful voice sounded incongruous sometimes when he spoke for the meek Sindhu, but when he sang her songs of hope, he believably sublimated them into celestial notes.
So, along with the story of Malti, there is so much that is going on, like I mentioned earlier. So one of the most interesting things, again, about this book is that there is this leitmotif of struggle for freedom. And this is not just national struggle for freedom or, a nation's struggle to come into its own. It's also, you see this struggle in the young girl, Malti, for empowerment. You see Sarla, this stepdaughter, who's also seeking empowerment, but in her own terms, which may not be the accepted norm. You see this, this popping up, and then there is Hema Kaki, you know, this wonderful character. And I mean, I'm not going to give away too much because ideas, each one of you should pick up this book and read it. So this is a teaser for you to, you know, be kind of like drawn to wanting to read the book. So there is Hema Kaki and all of this. So yes, on the personal level, there is the story of the struggle for freedom. But there's also the story of freedom that happens, which is the Indian struggle for freedom. And the book refers to two aspects, which I did ask Lakshmi, is it all right for me to talk about this? Because, you know, at a book event, we very seldom discuss politics. But here, I thought it was very interesting because the characters, Malti and Guru, who probably are the main characters of this book, you know, Malti especially there is this Veer Savarkar's brand of nationalism, and there is Mahatma Gandhi's brand of nationalism. And both are shown, and it's very interesting to see how the characters decide what brand of nationalism that they want to go with. So I'd like you to talk a bit about that.
As you rightly said, this is the intertwining of personal histories with national history in those epic times. Like the young people of today, even we have these political contestations and around ideologies, around reimagining India, and at that time, imagining India from the Bharatvarsha, from the concept of Bharatvarsha, civilizational concept to a nation-state concept. And who can take us to freedom? What is the best path to go to freedom? And from what I could make out from talking to my parents, their friends, there were times when they followed a particular ideology, say at some time. For example, Guru and Malti, they begin with reciting in Veer Ras, reciting Ne Mazashine, the famous poem of Veer Savarkar, and they admire him, they idolize him, and they don't stop doing that. Later on, there is a passage where they are discussing with Mohan Kaka, who is their landlord, but also their mentor in Bombay, who has moved from being a satyagrahi, a Congress supporter, satyagrahi. He's moved to being an armed revolutionary supporter, but also a strong believer, as the novel progresses, a strong believer in Hindutva, in also Veer Savarkar's teachings, and then eventually he joins the INA. So this is the trajectory. There was a certain eclecticism of ideology amongst the young people at that time. And if they felt disillusioned by one, they moved to the other, just as Mohan Kaka did. And I just want to capture one aspect. It's perhaps one could, if you read that chapter where there is this discussion between Mohan Kaka and Guru and Malti, how they discuss the Gandhian way versus the Gandhian way, which is the non-violent and gradualist way, and then the armed revolution and unifying the Hindus around, the nation way. So there are these two ways, and whilst Guru and Malti say we are going to be satyagrahis, they also very much support the idea of one Rashtra. So let me on the caste, because you see there is also a very strong social reform context of both Mahatma Gandhi and Veer Savarkar, and where they come together. So let me just read a passage very quickly. With all her respect for Hinduism, it was this caste fetish Malti could not accept or condone. She agreed with Veer Savarkar's concept of Hindutva, where the divisive and debilitating caste system was to be smashed once and for all. His call for one country, one God, one caste, one mind, brothers all of us without difference, without doubt, truly moved Malti, even though he left out the call to sisters all of us. Malti added that idea in her sermon to herself. Mahatma Gandhi too had been rightly trying to peel off the incrustations of caste from Indian consciousness, and yet it seemed as difficult as peeling off the skin itself. So these are very much the vacillations, if you will, of young people who are followers, but at other times they are also leaders. And it is these young people, it's also, this book is a tribute to the unsung heroes and sheroes of the Indian freedom movement. The role of women, young women, is not as recognized as it should be. And that's what I also try to bring out in the novel.
I'm going to now talk about another aspect of the book, which is, which makes you think about how much work has gone into this book. One, of course, is the research that Lakshmi has put into detailing various aspects of the culture, the period, various things that she talks about, like the walk from the college, what it looks like, etc., and so on, or Bombay in that period of time. But for me now, the thing that I would like to talk about at this point is the poetry and music that appears in this book. It's almost a sumptuous kind of portion of poetry and music there. And it's not easy to do that when you're writing a novel, because it becomes very difficult to meld it into the narrative. So how did you go about doing this? Lakshmi, do you have like a great interest in Marathi poetry? Is that where it began?
Yes. As I mentioned, I was infused with Marathi poetry, particularly by my father, and grew up feeling it, living it. So I had to put it in to a book that was a tribute to them, to my parents. So yes, it was difficult, but at least I have been told by both critics and readers that I have done it seamlessly. And what I have done is to use poetry, of course, English poetry as well, where it is applicable, where I've also used Marathi poetry, translated, and then my own poetry.
If I may interrupt, yes. Did you do the translation yourself, the
Yes,
Marathi poetry?
I transliterated myself.
Yeah, and the other wonderful thing is that the English poetry doesn't stand out. What does is the Marathi poetry. And then you think that, again, this thing about having missed out on the wealth of a culture.
Right.
So that's why I wanted to interrupt to tell you that.
That's right. No, in fact, thank you for that. And yes, I wanted to bring the beauty, the richness of Marathi poetry to pan-India, to all other readers and to the world, hopefully. So let me, if I may, recite some poetry from the book, which originally Marathi and then translated. So this poem, so there are love poems, then there are the Veer Rasa poems, that is, patriotic poems. Then there is a poem, an ode to the mother, because this very much orphanhood or half orphanhood, losing the mother, is a very poignant theme, one of the poignant themes of this novel. And then there is the, there are these playful poems by, say, Kanikar, the Fisherman's Love Song, for example. So let me begin with the one where Guru first declares his love. They have been great friends, but this is the first time he declares his love. He writes the poem on the stand and then recites and then makes her overwrite it. So this is the song or the poem. मेघांचे करी भूर्ज पत्र धरुनी अस्तांचली प्रत्यही स्वर्गीचे नवलेख कुमकुम रसे ती सांध्य देवी लिही रात्री शांत गभीर अंबुनिधीच्या आनील पृष्ठावरी लज्जा लेख लिही विकंपित करे ती तारका सुंदरी सारे ते मग लेख तुच्छ गमती चित्ताची आलोचनी तिचा अक्षय लेख एकच उभा मी मग्न पारायणी. Holding the birch bark of clouds in her hand, the glorious sunset as a perennial witness grand, her pen dipped in the red sap of my love infinite, the evening goddess writes a new missive exquisite. With enchanting shyness her cheeks suffused, my beloved rests her lotus head on my chest bemused. She creates our love epistles mystique in the poetic language of our breaths unique. All those other lyrical outpourings magnificent. In my heart's eyes seem so trivial and insignificant, for I am the sole, rapt and discerning reader vernal in the universe of this, my beloved's love letter eternal. Then there is the Fisherman's Love Song. आला खुशीत समिंदर त्याला नाही धीर आला खुशीत समिंदर त्याला नाही धीर होडील देईना ठरू होडील देईना ठरू ग सजणे होडील बघतो धरू तांबड फुटलं बाळावरी तुझ्या गालावर तस काहीतरी माझ्या उरावर पडे हुरहुरी झाला खुळा समिंदर त्याच्या उरावर चाले होरी भुरू भुरू चाले होरी भुरू भुरू ग सजणे होडीला बघतो धरू. So this is basically, he's saying the sea is ebullient, dancing with glee. He will not let his darling boat go free, keen to hold her tight in the waves of his arms. Besotted he is with the delicate boat's charms. Look, Sajni, the sea's waters a deep emerald green, the white foam churning and rising up to preen. And some of that glow is on my beloved's cheeks. It's the sign and the signal that my mind seeks. And then there is the patriotic poem by Martha Julian, which is वाडुदे कारागृहाच्या भिंतीची उंची किती मनमना नाही शिती भिंतीच्या उंचीत राहे काय आत्मा कोंडुनी मुक्त तो रात्रंदिनी भक्तीला जो पूर आला वाढतो तो अंतरी पायरी ने पायरी. So he's saying that no prison can hold my soul in bondage, and the patriotism that I feel, it will keep rising, gushing like the waters of the river. So these are the various poems that have been used, and there is the Mother one, and many other poems that I invite the readers to enjoy as they go through the novel and the journey of Malti and Guru. And the other many characters that you have also referred to.
It helps that, both Malti and Guru can kind of toss couplets at each other and, speak in poetry. I kept thinking, what if one of them couldn't? This book would have been a very different book. But now I come to the last question, which is what next?
Well, I'm very much involved right now in looking over the Marathi translation, which is happening. Madhushri Publishers from Pune, they are bringing out the Marathi translation. I'm very soon signing for the Telugu translation, and Hindi I'm looking forward to also. But I'm also hoping that I met some publishers here. I'm very much hoping that I can come out with a Kannada translation. But apart from translations, maybe I'm very much looking forward to a sequel. But it's
because you stop the book at a point where it just says, okay, now book 2 begins.
Yes. So a sequel, and then there is a book which relates to some 15, actually from 1981 to 2018. I've been in some ways associated with the United Nations. So there's some fiction coming on the UN, around the UN too. So yes, those are, and then hopefully web series on this book.
Excellent. And so now I think we should open the floor for questions.
Absolutely wonderful. And I think we have a few minutes for anyone has questions. We'd love for you to just stand up and someone will bring you a mic. Any questions at all? I think your talk has been so comprehensive and you've covered all the aspects. I think it was completely fascinating. I'm sure people are waiting to read the book themselves. There's someone there. Yes.
My name is Kantharkar. I have a question. Why did you choose English to write in and not your mother tongue Marathi?
Because my Marathi, I never studied Marathi. And now that I'm reading the Marathi translation, I'm able to, emote, and I can feel the language, but I don't think I was competent to write it in Marathi to begin with.
I think we have one more person there.
I'm continuing further to what our seniors said. I'm an NRI retiring from America. All my emotions is about my childhood, how I grew up, where I grew up.
Right.
Right from Assam, Guwahati to Bangalore, and Kannada being my mother tongue, it's easier to assimilate. But still the emotions is very important while writing the book. I appreciate that you took so much time from your Marathi lifestyle to write everything in English. I hope this, everybody, most Indians go through this. It's a database transfer, but emotions doesn't transfer. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, I think it's a combination of both. The database is memories, very much, as you said, but most of all, emotions. You know, was it yesterday, Gigi? Yesterday we visited our parents' place in Malleshwaram, in Pandurang Ashram. And we went into that apartment and I was so overcome with emotion. And memories came flooding by. So that's how you know, you channel those emotions into a book. That's how it works. Which talks about the little ant flying into the sky, having the daring to fly into the sky and being able to swallow the sun. And the spirit of the human spirit, you know, the deathless human spirit, the spirit of hope that will never be vanquishing hope. And of self-realization, which is an Indian civilizational value, as was mentioned by so many of the speakers also before me, that, you know, self-realization is something that is the possibility of every one of us. We are in many ways a Divyatma, isn't it? So we are able to achieve the impossible. So that's what swallowing the sun means. And in fact, now many people use it as to represent anything pioneering, anything extraordinary that people are able to do and achieve. Somebody even suggested I should have a Swallowing the Sun award.
Good evening, ma'am. I have a question here, this side, to your right. Yes.
Oh, here, this side.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for a wonderful launch. And my question is to your first-time authorship as your debut novel. In your stature, in your experience, what were the unique challenges and advantages that you had in terms of writing as a first-time author in this case?
Well, I think the advantages were, as I said, I grew up in a very literary environment and my own interest in literature. I read a lot as we grew up and, you know, it was something unlike, I'm sorry to say, not as much, the reading culture is not there as much today as when we were growing up. And there were certain classics you had to read in all the key languages, that like English and in this case also Marathi. But so that was an advantage I came with. Over the years, of course, being in diplomacy, I think the advantage was, many people ask me, you know, how does diplomacy equip you to be in literature? Because human nature, you observe human nature in different cultures, human psychology, philosophies of life. I think that also helps you to be a writer and write, because it's about life and people and their emotions and their relationships and relationships with what is around them, the history. So that is, but the disadvantage was that I hadn't written fiction or even poetry actually, a little bit of poetry but not so much. I had not written all these years. I was writing documents, UN documents or you know, speeches, making speeches, but not really, you know, literature. So this was a disadvantage, but it doesn't matter. I think you always, there always has to be the first time. You know, they say pioneers always have arrows on their back. But it has been a joyful journey, writing. And as I said, because of that personal element, that was the other advantage. I had a storyline in many ways, although I, you know, invented many stories within stories. But the broad line I had in mind. So that was an advantage to start as a writer.
Mrs. Puri, you've been a UN veteran, and this century, as many call it, the Asian century, how much of literature, in fact now with your penchant literature, how much of literature has helped in this dawn of Asian century?
Well, I think she is very much an epitome of someone who has contributed to the Asian literature century, and I'm trying to do my little bit. But I think Indian writers, whether they are writing in English or in their own languages, our Indian languages, they are creating, it's the Indian century too, which we very much like to hail and welcome. It's the Indian decade, and many are talking about the Indian century. And I think our contribution to global literature, I feel, is under-recognized. And there are still prejudices. You know, you were saying how the characters in this book are speaking in poetry. When I first sent my a few chapters to one of the publisher agents in UK, he turned around and said, but you know, people don't speak in poetry like this. So I just told him, I gave a reply back, and I said, then you should have met my parents and people of that generation, you know. So there is still that hesitancy in the world to recognize the greatness of Indian literature. So I'm very thankful to the Prabha Khaitan Foundation and others who are trying to promote and bring, not only, and I'll be going to attend a literature festival in New York, Indian American Literature Festival in New York in November, to bring Indian literature onto the world stage. As much as Asian literature, I'm sure there is, I don't know too much about some of the other Asian literature streams, but certainly India by itself is a continent, but it's also a world of great literature waiting to be recognized for its contribution to making it an Asian century.
Thank you for giving me the honor of the last question. Anita Bhargava and Lakshmi ji, we met a little earlier. As I confessed, I have not read the book yet, but I am eagerly looking forward to it. My question is a little different. I am the mother of two daughters. Wonderful that they have a sisterhood. I didn't have a sister. Luckily, both are readers, and something I have instilled in them. What would be your, I think, hope or desire that they would take away from this book? What would you wish for them to be inspired by from this? So I can go tell them.
Absolutely. How old are they?
15 and 11 today.
Okay. So somehow Amazon has put the age age at 16. Earlier they had put it at 18, so they can start reading next year. One of them can start reading next year. No, well, the book, Malti, all the women characters, the phenomenal, boundary-breaking women, I think the message is that you can be and do anything that you want to do and do. And that is something that, be truth-seeking, justice-seeking, empower other women and girls, just like Malti did, and claim your agency. So that's the message for your daughters, as to all daughters and women and girls.
Thank you. It's my privilege on behalf of Prabha Khaitan Foundation. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Mrs. Lakshmi Puri for sharing great insights and thoughts, and I would also like to appreciate Anita Nair for navigating the conversation around the book. It was truly a pleasure listening to both of you. I thank Kirloskar Group for their support in organizing today's event. And last but not least, to everyone here who helped us by joining us here today in commemorating this significant book launch. Without your presence and support, today's Kitaab event in Bangalore would not have been a successful and an enjoyable one. And I would like to say a very big thank you to the Taj Hotel Group and their entire team for this wonderful setup we have today, and I think the fabulous tea which is still open. Those of you who would like to enjoy that, please do go ahead. And definitely on your way out, the books are available, and I think the author is ready for her signing. She's got the pen in hand and ready, I think. So please do come back with your books.
May I also thank all of you who have come here, the great sports legends, and the luminaries from the scientific world, from the tech world, all the others who are here, from the cultural, the literature world, who have graced this evening and have done me the honor of being here. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone.